G'day, Quill.
Hey, Duncan, how you going?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
You ready to talk about some science news?
Always.
All right, let's do it. Bam.
Bam.
We're in it. All right. So you wanted to talk about something you saw from our dear friends at the ABC, Friends of the Podcast.
Yep.
And what was that?
Well, this isn't really a new science topic, but it's still a really important science topic. So this was a recent thing that's been both in the news and also an update that was on the ABC News website. And this is to do with, the evil single-use plastic bags. So basically, just recently we've had these whales washing up that have been dead on the beaches, and they've just, when they cut them open, they've got these huge, disgusting gutfuls of plastic, and it's just horrendous. Have you seen these images?
I saw the photo on this article, and it is disgusting.
Yeah.
It's like the whale ate an entire skip bin.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's foul, yeah.
Yeah, so, this is something we know has been happening for a long time, and fortunately, we are trying to bring in some rules about this. So one of the rules is just recently, from July the 1st, Queensland and Western Australia will actually ban single-use bags.
Mm-hmm.
And this will bring them into line with the ACT, South Australia, and Tassie, which are already doing this.
They've already done that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And Quill, we're based in which state?
New South Wales.
And are they listed in the ones you just said?
No,
they're not.
No.
Come on, New South Wales.
So already Victoria, which is the only other one apart from New South Wales that doesn't have a plan in place.
Mm-hmm.
Victoria already has a plan to follow suit.
Yep.
And New South Wales is the only one without
The
a
only
plan.
ones without. Terrible. Yeah. Okay.
So if you can, it's to our beautiful listeners out there, get involved if you've got something going on at your school or at your local shopping centre or something where you can recycle those plastic bags, because as we know, plastics take a really long time to break down, and a lot of time they don't even break down into something that goes away. They actually just break up into little bits that just stay around forever. They end up in our marine life, and they're really, really bad. Both plastic bags and things like plastic straws can be also really, really terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Or the other thing that you can do before even New South Wales brings in a ban, if it ever does, is you can just put on a personal ban for yourself.
Exactly.
So switch over to those the cotton bags,
mm-hmm.
which you can buy for probably a couple of dollars or something.
They're $1.
They're $1 each. Yeah. At places at your local supermarket.
Yeah.
I don't want to name brands here.
That's right.
But so they are A, stronger, and B, larger.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're a more effective bag, you're not going to be damaging the environment. They are, first of all, they'll take more water to produce, and they are more expensive to produce, but think about all the bags that you would use.
Exactly.
All the plastic bags that you would be using instead. And over the long term, it's a far more effective and more environmentally friendly solution.
Absolutely. And you've got to keep them with you. So I have green bags in my car. I put green bags in my husband's car. And I also have a little cotton bag in both my backpack for when I'm at work and in my handbag for the weekend. So that if I spontaneously buy something, I've always got a little cotton bag so I don't have to take the plastic with me.
Yeah, I've got a crate full of them at home right next to my door.
Perfect.
So they're ready to go at all times.
Don't leave the house without them.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we should start lobbying the New South Wales government.
I think so. We can get a lobby going on.
Yeah, so the other potential solution here is, other than a complete ban on plastic bags, is that some countries have introduced the idea of basically adding a levy, so a sort of a cost associated with purchase of plastic bags.
Absolutely.
Okay? Which the idea behind that is that it's supposed to reduce the amount of plastic bags that are actually used. So Ireland has tried this. They actually tried that in 2002. So good on them getting on it quite early, actually.
Early birds.
Yeah. And they introduced a cost of 15 pence, which is about 22 cents now.
Okay.
Australian cents.
Not too much.
Back then in 2002. And after that happened, there was a 90% reduction in use of single-use plastic bags.
So 90%, that's huge.
90% is absolutely massive. Now, a couple of years after that, in 2007, they actually bumped the price up just to make sure that the solution was going to be a long-term one, because they found that people were just like, that's okay, I'll pay my 15p.
Yeah, people got used to it.
They got used to it, and then they said, that's fine, it's 15p, what's that? So they bumped it up to, but that must have been when they switched over to the euro, so 22 euro cents, or about 32 Australian cents. So, that is definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my opinion, though, you really have to go the whole hog.
Yeah.
You've got to just get rid of those plastic bags. They're not doing any favours for anyone. They're not doing anything for our marine life.
That's right.
So, yeah, we've got better solutions.
We do. In fact, and so some people have been trying to do different things. So one of the ideas they had was to make degradable, biodegradable bags. Unfortunately, there's been a little bit of a kind of misconception about what actually that means. So people might have caught it on the checkout recently. There was an episode based on degradable versus biodegradable, where great show. Where basically they were saying that a lot of the things that are being made by the big companies to say we're doing our bit for the environment are actually degradable rather than biodegradable. So degradable means it's going to break up into lots of little plastic bits. So biodegradable means it will actually break down and go away. But if things are just degradable, they're not really helping. All you're doing is actually having plastics that break up into little bits that animals can eat and die from faster.
So it's basically like before you had one plastic bag and now you've got 6 plastic bags. Exactly.
You've got thousands of little pieces that can be eaten a lot quicker. So if you're trying to make sure you're doing the right thing, you want to look for biodegradable as opposed to just degradable stuff. So that's really important. We've just switched all our gear here at Fizzics over to biodegradable and also recycled stuff, everything that we can. Obviously, there's a couple of little things, part of our science kits, that we can't use things that are biodegradable or we wouldn't get the experiments done, but as much as we can, we swapped over to using these biodegradable things.
Because we use a lot of things like plastic cups.
We do.
For our experiments. Yeah. So, best to move completely to biodegradable if we can.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Yeah. There we go. So, give it a little bit. Hopefully we'll be, rid of this scourge of plastic bags forever. That would be nice.
It would be good. Another good thing, and this is just something if you're around, for me, every time I go to the beach with my dog, I pick up rubbish. So I take a plastic bag, fill up a plastic bag. It's no different. I'm going for a walk anyway. And don't just wait for Clean Up Australia Day. It's no different. Just pick up a few things along the beach. And it's amazing if everyone just did that, there probably wouldn't be any rubbish on the beach.
Because you're picking up after your dog anyway, aren't you?
That's right. So I always have little plastic bags just in case.
Picking up after your dog is the worst part of that. Picking up.
But at least it's my dog. But I always have a little plastic bag and I always fill it usually with rubbish, unfortunately. But at least it's getting it off the beach. So that's always a good thing. And there's always a lot of straws and a lot of plastic bags, which is really sad. Okay, so I had another thing I wanted to talk about today, Duncan. This is something I think is pretty important, and probably we know this. We get up pretty early to get our physics, to get science out to all the people. So this is something that actually a recent study looking at how sleep helps to heal wounds faster. So everyone's kind of already know that, if you're sick and stuff, you might need to have a bit of sleep, but people didn't realize how significant and how important that was. And not only is sleep really important for healing your wounds, it's actually almost more important than your nutrition and eating healthy and that kind of thing.
Right, okay.
Now, that can't be taken at 100%, because it was a small study, so you can't say we've just studied a few people. And also it was quite a short study, so you might need to look over a longer period. We're not saying you don't need to eat healthy, but over a few days, it's more beneficial to get some sleep than to spend half your day in the kitchen cooking up healthy things. Just hop back in bed and get some rest.
Yeah, 7 to 9 hours is the usual recommended amount of time, isn't it?
Exactly. So this study was done in a army hospital, and they actually gave people an injury that needed to be healed. I know.
Broke their leg or something.
Yeah, well, it's not that extreme. They gave them some blisters. Right? So apparently they don't even hurt. They were just a bit itchy.
Yeah.
So not so extreme. So they gave them the blisters and then they separated the groups out and they monitored some people who were given 7 to 9 hours sleep and some people who were given 2 to 3 hours sleep over a 3-day period.
2 to 3 hours each night? Or
2 to 3 hours each night, which is still not a lot.
That's nothing.
Yeah. So they had to give them a lot of activities and TV and ping pong games and stuff like that to try and keep them awake, because obviously after a couple of days of 2 hours sleep, probably not doing so well. But they actually found from these studies that the people in the group where they got more sleep recovered much better than the other group. So they also gave these people some supplements as well to take. So they also checked to see whether the addition of some really nutritious drinks with protein and lots of vitamins and stuff in it helped that. And they tested both the people that were getting sleep and the people that weren't getting sleep. So overall it showed that the nutrition didn't make much of an effect, but the amount of sleep they were getting had a big effect on it.
And they even did it with a placebo as well.
They did, of course.
Well. Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know, A placebo is when you basically run a pretend version. So if you were saying testing the nutrition and how that nutrition affected the healing of the wound, you would get one group that were taking a really nutritious vitamin protein kind of milkshake, and you get the other group that had a milkshake that tasted exactly the same but without all the nutrition and vitamins. And that way both groups don't know whether they are getting the vitamins and nutrition, because otherwise they can actually use their brains and think that they're getting better because they're getting all these vitamins.
Yeah.
So it's to stop this effect where they think they're getting better because they're getting it and they're not actually getting it. So
and it's actually a really strong effect.
It's a huge effect. Yeah, really
so
interesting.
Any kind of study like this, you have to account for the placebo effect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really neat.
Absolutely. So
But
I
what
thought
was
that
the
was
result?
really interesting. Well, the main result was that obviously that the sleep was really important in wound injury, and that there wasn't as strong a effect from nutritional things as they had anticipated. But obviously they did say they needed to do it over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Probably over a longer period of time you would start to see the effect of nutrition.
Yeah,
as
reading
well.
here, it says that the people who slept 7 to 9 hours, or normal amount of sleep, or maybe 9 it's actually quite long. Bit of a sleep in those
9
days.
would be pretty good.
They healed in about 4 days.
Yep.
Whereas the people who were sleep deprived,
Yep.
they healed in about 5 days.
Yeah.
So that's actually 25% extra time.
Yeah, and we're just talking about a few blisters. If you were looking at something like surgery or something major, then we're really talking about a big difference in your recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. That could be a massive amount of time.
Massive amount of time.
Yeah. Be interesting to see. I mean, the effect could stay at around 25%. So if you have, let's say that you have surgery, you might take 4 weeks to heal.
Yeah.
If you're sleep deprived, that could turn into 5 weeks.
Exactly.
Which is, you don't want to stay an extra week in hospital.
Exactly.
Or recovering. But then again, we need to do more studies to find out.
Yeah,
so
of course.
it could be, it might take you only an extra day, or the effect could be even worse than one whole week.
Yeah.
So again, going back to that classic phrase that we love at Fizzics TWIST, it remains to be seen.
It does remain to be seen.
Yeah, I think we'll keep an ear to the ground on this one. It's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. I can tell you what, when I was recovering from my severe injury last year, I slept more than I reckon I have slept in the last 4 years in that short amount of time.
And look at you now.
And look at
Bouncing
me now.
off the walls.
Jumping up and down. Got my leg back.
Absolutely. I did the same actually when I broke my leg.
Yeah.
Which is not, to anyone listening out there, I would not recommend it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't snap your Achilles either.
I think I must have slept so much more than I ever did. Yeah. If I got 9 hours sleep every night, oh my God.
Yeah.
Going to bed early tonight though.
Early night. Early to bed, early to rise.
Yeah, exactly.
Alright, so now we're going to talk something a little bit different, change tunes a little bit. Now this one's a little bit more complicated, but we'll break it down a little bit so everyone can understand. Now, I have been accused of having a little bit of a preference for things that are related to microscopy and the brain and things like that. And that's just a little bit of a offshoot from my background.
Yeah,
so,
makes sense. All things biology, broadly speaking, I think.
But that's okay, because it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And anyway, Duncan's the space guy, and we've got a space one coming up next, so that's totally fine. So I have a really interesting article, and this was also on ABC Science, and this was a really interesting study that was done where science have actually created a 3D printed brain-like tissue using stem cells. Okay, so that's a lot to digest in one.
That's a lot, yeah.
It is. Let's talk about what that means.
Word by word.
Yeah.
So what was the first part was 3D printed.
Yeah, okay, so everyone knows a 3D printer. Yep. A lot of people might have had them in their school or at their work, or everyone's seen someone that's printed something random, maybe a Christmas ornament.
We have one here.
We have one
which
here.
Which is actually the first time that I ever saw one used.
Yeah.
It was right here at Fizzics.
So we have one going at Fizzics all the time. We're always making our own random things.
Yep.
So basically a 3D printer is like a regular printer, but instead of printing an image on a piece of paper, you're printing a whole object, right? So it's in 3D. And usually they use plastics to do this, kind of melted plastic, and it fits together. But in this case, what they've actually done is they've used what's called a bio-ink. So instead of using plastic as ink, they have used a bio-ink, which is actually made of stem cells. Now, stem cells, if you don't know, are actually the cells in the body that are able to turn into any kind of cell. So normally if you say got your cells, you've got your cells and they've already decided what they want to do. So they've already differentiated. They already know, hey, I'm going to be a bone, I'm going to be blood, whatever I'm going to do. But stem cells are still able to say, I'm not quite sure what I want to be yet.
I could be a skin cell, I could be even a brain cell.
Exactly. Yeah. And the great thing about them is then we can use those to make kind of whatever we want. So by using a bio-ink with stem cells in it, we can basically print cells into the shape of something we want that have the ability to become the cell that we need, and they're already in the shape that we want.
Yeah.
Which
Beautiful.
is awesome.
Which is just incredible.
It is incredible.
Yeah. So I think they said the main application of this kind of thing would be in treating disease. So certain things like, let's say, Parkinson's disease or schizophrenia.
Absolutely.
And the reason being that they can 3D print a type of cell that makes something called a neurotransmitter. A neurotransmitter being effectively a type of chemical that's in your brain.
Yeah, basically.
That tells your brain to do certain things.
Yeah, so we've got some chemicals that make us happy, some that might make us sad, some that do lots of other interesting things. But basically they come from a certain kind of cell, and if we're able to print those cells, we might be able to replace when those cells get damaged, and a lot of those damaged cells is what leads to a lot of our neurodegenerative disorders and things that make our brain go a little bit crazy and haywire and not working quite right.
So Parkinson's, for example, that's a really good example actually,
That
because
is.
the kind of cells that are responsible for producing dopamine, when they break, that can lead to Parkinson's.
It can.
And dopamine's another type of that neurotransmitter that we said, which is the chemical in your brain.
Yeah, fantastic. So the really cool thing about this is also that they actually take brain tissue, the brain tissue that they're going to make, to make the cells. They actually take skin or blood cells from the person they want to use it in. So they basically take the cells from a person, convert them into stem cells so that they can then work with them to build whatever cell they need. But what this means is that it then has the same genetic fingerprint. So it's the same. So it's your cell, right? So you're printing out a cell that it's the same as your cells. So it means your body doesn't reject it, right? Because we don't want someone else's cells coming into our body. Your body will fight against, like, if Duncan tried to chuck some cells into my brain, my body would be like, hey, wait, no, man, I don't want Duncan's cells in here. These are weird cells. And you would have a big response that would try and fight that off. So the awesome thing is they're actually printing these using the actual genetic material from the person that needs the help.
Yeah, and just a bit of background on that as well. The other resource that we can get stem cells from is from, or what they call embryonic stem cells. So they're effectively taken from before a baby is born. They're an embryo, and those we can take some cells out of those, which are stem cells. Which is another way to get them, but the fact that they actually come from the person that you're treating is the really, really important part.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. So the way they do this is they actually print kind of a almost like a little cube, and this is like kind of crossover patterns, sort of like you might see a lattice on the wooden wall out in the garden or something like that. So they make this kind of lattice into a cube, and then they pump that full of nutrients and growth factors, and it's kind of like this weird little jelly cube that's got room for the cells to then turn into something like a neuron, which is these cells that are involved in all these brain disorders, which is really awesome.
And they put it into the brain, and away it goes.
Away it goes.
You do need some other sort of support networks, I guess, in the brain, such as like wiring up some blood support, some veins and stuff to it. But other than that,
so I mean, this is early days, right? So they're just starting out, but the kind of idea of this is really interesting. And obviously, all these kind of things, they're complicated experiments, so they take a lot of research. So, it's just kind of the first step towards doing this, but really interesting step. And a lot of potential in medical research and in customized transplants that people don't reject, which would be really fantastic.
And these guys who actually wrote this paper, they seem really, really optimistic about the future of it. So in things like Parkinson's, like I mentioned before. So given that that's such a terrible disease, let's be honest, that would be making a big difference for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So something else that's cool about this, well, it's just something interesting about this, which I wanted to just point as a little side note. One of the issues with this, only thing about it, is that because these stem cells don't already know what cells they want to be, they do have potential to turn into kind of tumour cells.
Oh yeah.
Now, because they haven't been defined to go into a certain kind of cell type, and this is what I think is cool. Not that tumours are cool, but they can develop into teratomas. Now, teratomas are basically tumours that contain more than one kind of cell. So this can be like a tissue that grows with like a brain that's got teeth in it, or like hair coming out of his stomach. Yeah, which is really, really gross, but really, really cool. Have you ever been to at the University of New South Wales? They have a disease museum.
Yes, I was there late last year.
It's awesome, and they've got lots of stuff like this. And I remember I went there once as a young kid, and then again when I was doing my PhD there at UNSW, and the place is amazing. Like if you go and look at all these specimen jars, and there's all these weird teratomas and stuff. So
are they really in there? I didn't remember seeing them.
Oh yeah, they're there.
That's so cool.
I think I hung out there for a long while because it was really creepy and awesome.
What is there? Do you remember what specifically there is?
There's definitely one with teeth, and there's definitely one with hair.
Whole teeth.
Not like whole teeth, not a whole set of teeth.
Yeah,
there's like teeth poking out of a growth.
That is
with
bizarre.
like some hair and some other cool things like that.
Terrifying.
It is terrifying. And I think from memory, there's a big teratoma with teeth and hair, and it was pulled from someone's neck.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that happens, and maybe future Duncan will come in, or future Quill even, a new character. One of the reasons that can happen is because of a parasitic twin. Have you heard about those?
I have.
Yeah.
They're gross too.
They're really gross.
Let's do an episode on parasitic twins.
Maybe we should do a whole episode. Yeah. What are you doing next week? Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that later. Anyway, so yes, apart from the whole parasitic twins and teratomas issue, this is really cool. Alright, so Quill, let me ask you a question.
Is it about space?
You know me too well. This is how I start all of my stories. Like, let me ask you a question, a little hypothetical question. And then inevitably it's about space. It's like, do you like space lasers? Yes, of course.
I do. Let's hear about it.
Anyway, so, let me ask you a question. Have you been to any sort of remote area recently and looked up at the stars?
I actually have. I went to a wonderful beach called Sunburnt Beach down the south coast, and I went camping down there, and it was like looking at stars. I haven't seen that many stars in a long time. It was awesome.
Right? So you go somewhere a little bit remote, and all of a sudden you can actually see the entire Milky Way galaxy, which is absolutely incredible. So if, to our dear listeners, you've never done that before, highly, highly recommended. Go somewhere away from the city if you live in a city. Say a couple of hours drive out, like the Blue Mountains or Sunburnt Beach. Look up the stars. There's so much up there that you'll never have seen before. It's absolutely incredible. Anyway, the reason that I asked was that the reason that you can see so much starlight when you're out in those remote areas is because in the cities we get something called light pollution.
Absolutely.
Okay? Yeah. Which means that because there's so many lights on in, say, office buildings and houses and that sort of thing.
Traffic.
Stadiums, you know, whatever it might be. The actual starlight that's coming to us is not as visible. Yeah. Okay? So, it turns out that this phenomenon of this sort of pollution of the air, I guess you can say, is not just limited to things like light. All right? So we found this story on a website called Science News for Students, and we'd highly recommend this.
Yeah, great resource. Lots of cool stories.
Yeah, a lot of really interesting stuff, and they break stuff down into really simple terms. So
they do.
Really good stuff. But what they've come out with a story that basically says that scientists are having quite a bit of trouble looking into space now with their telescopes, okay? Because there's so much pollution of a different type of radiation.
So not light.
Not light.
Okay.
So these types of interstellar telescopes, if we can call them that, actually work by radio waves. Okay? Yeah, so we can see what's out in distant space using radio waves. What's happening is because there are so many radio waves being emitted on Earth, things like Wi-Fi, your mobile phone.
So it's not just me listening to the radio on the way to work?
Not just the radio,
I see.
but these are all different types of radio waves. Yep. So Wi-Fi, your mobile phone, your microwave as well actually emits radio waves. Well, microwaves, but they're the same type of thing. What else? The list is endless.
Yeah. Well, Wi-Fi and phones is a lot.
That's a lot.
These days, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what they're finding is that because there's so much of this radiation being emitted, that it's clouding or polluting the frequency, what would you call it? What's the word, Quill? Help me out here.
Well, I guess it's the space, right? So if we think about waves, and we know we've got the visible spectrum, which is all the colours that we can see that are in white light. And then we know we've got other things like X-rays, we use to look at our bones, and we've got ultraviolet light, which are those awesome purple lights that make your clothes glow. And radio waves are a little bit different, but also part of that spectrum of
We can't
energy.
see them, but they're everywhere.
And we can't hear them.
We can't hear them either.
No.
That's right. So
They're
basically,
there.
if you are standing pretty much anywhere really, you're constantly being hit by these radio waves.
Yeah.
They're absolutely everywhere. They don't do anything to you. It's
No.
fine. They're harmless, but they're absolutely everywhere.
But the problem is, I guess, that all these different kinds of radiation have a different amount of energy, which means they travel imagine they traveled on a different kind of space. So they're all taking up their own space in the air. They're on their different frequency, which is what you're saying, which is often they basically, how regularly they pulse, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so the issue then, I guess, is if all these Wi-Fis and phones and microwaves are taking up the space where the radio waves are supposed to be. Is that
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
So sometimes, most of the time they're actually limited to a certain frequency. So let's talk about when you tune in your radios into a radio station. You might choose something like 94.5, 105.7, right? That's a frequency, okay? Sometimes, from these radio transmitters, they can actually bounce slightly outside of their lane a little bit, not where they're supposed to be.
Yep.
And so people who are, say, trying to look through a radio telescope, all of a sudden they're getting this interference from radio frequencies that shouldn't be there.
Okay, so they're getting in the way, right? They're interfering.
They're getting in the way, that's
Just
right.
like you interfere if you're like standing around in the kitchen when your parents are trying to make dinner.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's really great analogy, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So the idea being that they have actually built radio telescopes in these sort of quiet zones.
Okay.
Kind of like the quiet carriage for a train, except it's for telescopes. Okay.
Awesome.
Great analogy.
All analogies today.
Yeah.
So these radio telescopes is kind of like these the big dishes, right, that you see.
That's right. So they don't actually produce a visible image at the end of it. They produce data. So there was one example in this story from Science News for Students where one particular scientist was looking at the data that was coming in from his radio telescope, and he was going, oh my god, I'm getting some incredible data right now, and then looked at it in a little bit more detail and went, oh no, it's just Wi-Fi signals that I'm picking up right now.
Okay, so the issue is now with all this traffic in the radio wave kind of signals, people that are trying to research out in space can't do their research properly.
That's right, because of all this interference.
That's
and
no good.
The funny part was that this particular scientist was actually telling someone else, I think he said he was on the snowfields or something like that, and he was telling this guy, I had this great set of data the other night, but then I realized it was Wi-Fi, even though we're supposed to be in a quiet zone. And this other guy said, oh, yeah, I accidentally turned on my Wi-Fi that night. Sorry about that.
Ooh, that's no good.
Yeah, trying to do it in secret.
Big no-no.
Big no-no.
Yeah, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So that's very simple, isn't it? Something as small as that. And this is because these big radio telescopes, I know, have those giant dishes. And the giant dishes are designed to be able to pick up on really, really, really faint signal, right?
So super sensitive.
I mean, obviously, we're trying to listen to something going on in space.
Yeah.
In terms of its waves, then it's really far away. It's going to be really faint. We're going to be lucky to see it. So even one person turning on their Wi-Fi when they're not supposed to is enough to really get in the way of what they're trying to research.
It's like trying to hear what someone is saying if they're whispering to you from the other side of a football pitch.
Okay,
like you'd have to have pretty sensitive hearing.
Yep.
And you'd need an entire dish to do that.
I reckon my dog could hear it.
You reckon it's got sensitive?
Yeah.
Can you hear the postman? Is that the idea?
You can hear when I open the cheese.
All dogs can do that.
I don't know how she knows what cheese sounds like, but she can hear it.
Is that cheese, Quill?
Yeah.
Cool.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Something to be bit concerned about, but maybe a potential solution here would be to introduce more of these quiet zones.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And we might have sort of mandated areas where if you drive through them, for example, then, well, first of all, you wouldn't be allowed to drive through them because things like the spark plugs in your car can actually emit their own radio wave, believe it or not. Or, say, failing that, you'd have to turn off your phone. Electric fences aren't allowed because if something touches an electric fence, it actually sends out its own radio wave.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It'd be like an electricity dead zone in order to make these things work because they have to be... Yeah, so if you're trying to listen to someone at the other end of a football pitch who's whispering to you and someone's tapping on you going, Quill, 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 it would be pretty hard to listen, right? So the same idea applies here.
Oh wow, that's really interesting. So in this article, I also noticed that they talk about that they're running a competition for people to try and design ways to kind of filter out that interference that getting in the way of all of our signals. So they've tried it before using special algorithms. So an algorithm is basically just a bunch of instructions that tells a computer how to do something. So if I said, I'm going to give you an algorithm to how to make your breakfast, I might say, get out a bowl, get some cereal, pour the cereal in, pop some milk on top. Bam, there's your cereal making algorithm. Now, obviously, these ones are more complicated, but they basically just tell your computer how to get rid of all that interference. And I did read that they're trying to they're running a bit of a competition over a 2-year time period that's going to hopefully find some different ways that people can then share the same wavelength, so the same frequency.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's I think there's a $2 million prize for the team that can do that. And it's a 2-year competition. It runs until the end of 2019 to try and figure out ways scientifically that you can actually share those wavelengths without them getting in the way of each other.
That's really interesting.
It is.
Because that is like...
I have no idea how they do it, but...
No. Cool. If you did, you'd win $2 million.
Yeah, that's right. Damn. Okay, I've got to get working on it.
That's like, really, if you think about radio stations, you can't tune into 2 at once. You have to pick one.
No, that's right.
You can only ever have one broadcasting on one particular frequency.
That's right.
And you also run into problems with some Wi-Fi modems or Wi-Fi routers.
Yep.
They all have to automatically detect a frequency that's not used. Because if they collide into each other and they're on the same frequency, it won't work.
Yeah, no good.
Yeah, and because it's going to be... kind of imagine if you have, say, like a 3-lane highway and you've got more and more cars or more Wi-Fi routers and cell phones, mobile phones joining this 3-lane highway, it's going to get more congested and congested all the time. So we're trying to figure out, maybe we'll fit more people into one car.
They're also trying to say, hey, maybe this lane or this frequency can just be for scientists, because the research they're doing is really, really important. So kind of like if you're on the road and an ambulance is coming, you need to pull over and let them through. Totally. Or if you're there and there's a bus lane, the buses, that's just for buses. So same idea would be to make a frequency that's just for scientists to use, so that they don't get all of your just hanging out playing whatever game that you're up to. Fortnite, I think, is the one that's going at the moment. So that your Fortnite on the Wi-Fi isn't interfering with people that are actually trying to discover really important things about our universe.
I'm sure it's a great game. But...
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
All right, cool. So there you go.
Yeah, so really interesting things going on in the world this week, as always.
Always. Yeah, we never run out of things, do we?
We don't.
So that's a wrap on Fizzics TWIST for this week. So thank you all for joining us. Don't forget that you can meet the wonderful people of physics at your school, vacation centre or birthday party. Just go to fizzicseducation.com.au. Also, if you like us, you can rate us on iTunes. Really helps us out. And just a quick note that Fizzics TWIST will be taking a break for the rest of the school holidays, so we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with more fresh science news. In the meantime, if you'd like to hear some thought-provoking discussions with leading education providers, you can check out the Fizzics Ed podcast run by the beautiful, lovely Ben Newsom.
Our awesome boss. Fantastic. Always has a word to say, especially about science.
Sometimes too many. Anyway, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Enjoy your school holidays.